Hello, welcome. I'm Dr. John with Voyage Clinics Podcast. I'm a family doc and passionate about education and the community. And today I'm here to learn, and I hope that you all learn with me today. It's going to be super fun. I have Aimee Hadfield, one of my favorite people. I say that a lot, but she really is. Today, Aimee, I just want you to introduce yourself. Tell us about your background and your training, and then I want to hear about your journey.
Okay. So I'm Aimee Hadfield, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. So I'm a mental health therapist.
Yeah.
A lot of times people hear social worker and make up things, but So
I work in the hospital and just help people with their housing.
Yep. Yeah. And I am a board certified practitioner of psychodrama, sociometry, and group psychotherapy. And I am a practitioner applicant for trainer, which means that I can offer psychodrama training hours for others working towards certification.
Dude, I'm so excited about this because I am familiar with the therapy space to some degree. We had a psychologist, PhD psychologist person that was in my residency, and she would work closely with the residents and faculty and everybody, make sure everybody's reasonably emotionally intelligent. But also she would help us with our clients. And so if we had somebody struggling with XYZ things, and so I've always been a huge advocate of mental wellness and mental health. And I learned a lot about, the different types of therapies and the cognitive behavioral therapies and rational living therapies and all these things. And when in our discussions about psychodrama, I thought that's super cool. And I feel like you can unpack certain things in a very creative way. And before we get into the nitty gritty, I maybe just hear a little bit about your journey. What was it that drew you to mental wellness and psychodrama maybe specifically?
Yeah. So I actually got a Master of Social Work degree with no intention of becoming a therapist. And that sounded really weird to a lot of people, especially considering that I did my whole bachelor's degree in 28 months, and then I went straight into a master's program. And the reason I got into this field was actually to help families like mine, which are families affected by substance use disorders. So I'm one of 10 kids, but 3 of my siblings had those struggles. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea that addiction is a disease. It runs in families. It's based in trauma a lot of the time. And so in 2015, so this is all very new, just kind of decided that I needed to be in this field, but had no intention of being a therapist because I didn't think therapy worked. Yeah. So along my education journey, I actually lost my brother to addiction. And that there was a fork in the road where it could have completely knocked me off or fueled me forward.
Galvanized you.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
And it just fueled me forward. And so I graduated with my Master of Social Work degree, and right about the time I was graduating is when we started Heart and House. And Heart and House is an experiential therapy center now, but then it was just a place for people to come to heal. So the idea was to get the movement and the art and yoga, breath work, all the things, but I didn't have any intention of facilitating any of them. I just wanted to teach families. So in May of 2021, I ended up going to a psychodrama training in Tennessee. And I say that I accidentally went to it because the person I was supposed to go with canceled on me last minute and didn't end up going. So I went all by myself, and I was so afraid. And on the first night of the training, we were doing some activity, and the trainer asked me a question. And I kind of looked up, thinking of the right answer because I want to be so smart, And she said, "Don't look up, look in." She said, "The answer is not up there. If you're looking up, you're in your head. The answer's in your body." And so I was like, all right. And that was kind of the turning point in my whole life. And so I booked another psychodrama training on the way home from that one.
Oh, cool.
Because I felt so this is it.
You got so much out of it. And you had been trained in the traditional models of cognitive behavioral therapies and the different therapies out there and the different modalities and such. And I want to unpack one thing that you said, that you didn't really think that therapy worked. And I want to unpack that just briefly because it is a mixed bag. And I've sent people to therapy and they come back worse. I've sent people to therapy and they've been helped. I've sent people to therapy and they've had nothing. And so it's hard because I don't know the answer to this question. I personally think emotional intelligence is of the top 3 things we need to be working on in our lives, right? Like diet, exercise, emotional intelligence. Let's just do those things. And like we will win the war on health and wellness. And I don't know. Can we unpack that just a little bit? I don't want to slander anybody or talk negatively about therapy. I think it can be really beautiful and I'm a huge fan, but it can also maybe, I don't know why there's a mixed bag there. Can you speak to that space briefly?
I think for me, it was that I know now, right, looking back in hindsight, that I needed something that was embodied because I'm really good at overthinking and really good at just letting my brain spin out. And so traditional talk therapy works really well for a lot of people, like you were saying. I think that what it comes down to is that there's no one right answer. And if there was a right answer, we'd all be better and we wouldn't be having this conversation, right?
Yeah.
If there was something that worked for everyone, it would have worked by now. And so I think that what we need is an individualized approach, which is very, very much like you provide in the physical medicine world, right?
Yeah.
And to find out what the person needs. And that's one of the things about psychodrama is that it's very centered on the person. The idea is that we have something in us that knows the way out. It knows how to heal. We are oriented toward thriving. And so my job as a therapist, as a psychodramatist, is to guide people to find that part of themselves.
Whoa. I love this idea. So I grew up in a rural town and there were no therapists for 250 miles. And, we worked hard. We had, a little ranch. We had, goats and horses, and I shoveled a lot of manure and had a huge garden. And, we worked at the mine. My dad worked at the mine. And we didn't have a lot of emotional intelligence work there, but the answers often came. Like I was feeling a certain way when people spoke to me a certain way. And I didn't like that feeling. So I just I don't know, maybe I spent a lot of time in the mountains and meditating. I live 15, 20 miles down the valley from my small town of 800 people. So it was too busy in town. My dad had to move 15 miles down the valley. So I rode a bus off a dirt road, rode a bus into town. And I'd spend there's only one other kid on the bus, right? So we're done talking. And so I'm looking at the mountains and I'm riding my bus home and I'm pondering. That's it. Just kicking the ball around. And I'm not stressed. I'm just pondering. And little glimpses of truth would just come to my brain. And I love what you said about we have the healing parts inside of us. I didn't know where I learned some of the emotional intelligence things that I learned and some of the resilience things that I learned. They just came to me in my journey of creating space to just kind of breathe and meditate. I spent a lot of time in the wilderness hunting and fishing and just me, right? And just breathing and receiving, right? So I love what you're saying here is that if you give people a pathway to their own healing that's personalized, maybe they can find those answers and those solutions. Wow.
Yeah.
That's rad.
Yeah, it really is. And so we end up having a lot of conversations with parts of ourselves. And in psychodrama, we have words for all this stuff. We call them intrapsychic roles, and just plain language is going to be better.
Okay. So I like the cool words too.
Yeah. And so that part of ourselves in psychodrama, we call it the autonomous healing center.
Wow.
And the idea is that we all have it within. And what I was saying earlier is based on a quote by Zerka Moreno, who's one of the founders of psychodrama. Mm-hmm. And she says that the longer that she was a psychotherapist, the more she distanced herself from the title, because she's not actually fixing anyone's psyches. Mm-hmm. And her exact words were, "I am a guide in the wilderness."
Like a Sherpa. Mm-hmm. That's how I consider myself too in medicine.
Yeah.
I'm just your Sherpa holding some things.
Yeah. And she said that the other piece of the quote that we don't see a lot, like when I see it reposted, I don't see a lot, but I love, and that's probably just the way I am. She says in being a guide in the wilderness that sometimes she wields a machete and sometimes we walk hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And that's really what it is. A lot of the trauma work that we do in psychodrama is not the deep, hard, heavy lifting. A lot of it is just walking hand in hand and guiding and exploring and kind of being a like turning over rocks and finding out what's underneath.
Whoa. Can you speak to the history of psychodrama, like a little bit about some history there?
Yeah, so psychodrama just turned 104 years old.
Holy mother.
Right? You think it's new.
I've never heard about
that. So people think that it's like this newfangled thing.
Yeah.
And it's really the foundation of a lot of the work that we do. One of the stories we love to tell as psychodramatists is that Dr. Moreno had a conversation with Sigmund Freud where he said, I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm going to paraphrase.
Sure.
You meet people in your office and analyze their dreams. And I meet them in the street and teach them to dream again.
Whoa. And
that is like, that's exactly what I hope to do with it. Wow. And so the psychodrama started really as like social justice work in Vienna in the early 20th century. And so like in the 1920s, Moreno organized sex workers in Vienna and helped them kind of unionize and get like legal representation.
Sweet.
And then that's kind of where he was a philosopher and a psychiatrist. So it kind of went from there.
Wow.
But the first psychodrama was in Vienna. He put a chair on the stage during a meeting and said, "Who will lead us?" And like invited all these world leaders to reverse roles and become the leader of the new world order and say what they would do. And so that's what we call the first psychodrama.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's super cool. In psychology, there is like the brain-centered, frontal cortex-y, let me fix my emotions through my thinking, through my cognitive behavioral therapy, right? This is some of the foundation of some of the philosophy behind. And it is, the way that I think affects the way that I feel, therefore. If I fix the way that I think, I can affect the way that I feel. And to some degree, that is, there's evidence there that it's helpful, et cetera. But then there's the whole emotional space. That's once you're out of your head, there's this emotional space. And I've seen people where they're past frontal cortex fixing of any kind. And it's just pure, like raw emotional. And those people often end up like very heavily medicated in a hospital setting, like, we got to stabilize this out of balance emotional state, and then get back into the cognitive behavioral therapy state, et cetera. It sounds like this is more visceral or more.
It's embodied.
It's somatic. It's more. I'm using dumb words, but a lot of us are kinesthetic. I'm using these weird words. I'm sorry, I keep using dumb words. But we're kinesthetic learners. We learn by moving. We learn by like, I'm a kinesthetic guy. I played all the sports. I do all the physical things, and it helps me learn and grow. And I move a lot, and I need that in order to thrive emotionally, mentally.
Yeah.
and psychodrama, I think, puts that in play in mental wellness. What I'm hearing a little bit, super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool.
It's totally embodied. It's a lot of the kind of embodied and experiential methods that we use today are based on the foundations of psychodrama. So Dr. Moreno said, the body remembers what the mind forgets. And that was, almost a century before we had other books that say the same thing.
The body keeps the score.
Yeah, yeah. And so he knew that. And he also knew that if we could increase our spontaneity, then we could change our behavior. And that's the interesting thing about psychodrama, is that that's the thing we're measuring. That's the thing we're looking to increase, is spontaneity, where we define spontaneity as the energy that allows us to have a new response to an old problem or an adequate response to a new one. So that's what we're looking for as far as behavior change. We're not looking for, like, if we put it like on an addiction standpoint, right? We're not looking for like, well, just stop using drugs, just call somebody before you pick up, right? We're looking for actually like, how do we have that new response? And we can role play it and live it and have the person know what it feels like in their body to make the different choice. So they've practiced it, right? Just like in sports.
Yeah.
They've practiced.
Yeah. physically and mentally.
They've walked through it.
Yeah. So this is so fascinating. So the science there is when you try something new and spontaneous and different, there's a BDNF spike, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is growth hormone for your brain, that happens in your brain. So like I encourage people to have these spikes in their bodies, in their brains, because it's really good for changing behavior and changing thoughts and changing. And so I'm all about progression and growth and change. And so physical exertion, boom, it creates a BDNF spike, right? Like cardiovascular exercise creates it. Dance lessons create it. Voice lessons, music lessons. And this spontaneous like, okay, stand up on stage and now you're going to change this role and you're going to do this thing that's new and different and totally foreign to you. That is BDNF in its like super high dose.
Yeah.
Because you're putting somebody in a pretty uncomfortable state and inviting them to re-script spontaneously.
Yeah. Wow. And we can do it in individual or group. I love group.
Yeah.
I think if I could only do group therapy for the rest of forever, that would
Really?
be my choice.
How come you love it?
Group.
What do you love it?
Well, psychodrama is also the original form of group psychotherapy. Dr. Moreno coined the term in the early 30s. And so when we do it in group, we use sociometry, which is like the study of human connection, and we can measure all kinds of things with sociometry. But we use that to create cohesion and safety in the group. So we don't have to go through all the group phases and like spend 6 weeks getting to know each other before we can do deeper work. We can safely and effectively create the safety to start doing work around like resourcing and strengths building. And so we can really connect with, the part of me that knows, or my wise self, or a future self who's done the thing that I'm blocked from doing. And we reverse roles with it and we embody it. Wow. Right. So if I'm the protagonist in a drama, I have the opportunity to reverse roles with my future self and have my future self tell me what I had to do to get there. But it's me in the role. So I know. But psychodrama allows the participant to know that they know.
And the sociometry, I see it like a geometric shape with a bunch of people in it. That's what I'm kind of envisioning. And is it just that there's critical mass there that people can connect and feel reasonably vulnerable and have some experience with? What is it about that group session that makes it unique?
Well, we're making choices. So here's another with the like big words. So we use like a spectrogram with a group where we like say like that side of the room is 0 and that side of the room is 10. How much hope do you feel right now in this moment? And then
the group kind of moves.
Yeah, they feel it, and their bodies will stop.
Wow.
At the place where they are, and then we share where we are and why.
Whoa.
And I've done it with like, in like residential treatment with like cigarettes and strawberry shortcake. Like, what are you feeling right now? Like, you can be
sure.
Yeah, like any two things that are seemingly opposite. And so we can do hope and fear. We can do experience and not experience, anything we want to measure in the group. So not only am I as a group leader seeing where people are, but they're seeing where each other are.
Yeah.
And then we can try on, well, what would it be like to take a step toward creativity or toward experience?
Yeah.
And what changes?
Yeah.
And then put them back where they are. And then another one is a locogram. And that's what I have tattooed on my arm, is different in its locations. But we mark different locations on the floor, like 4 or 5 spots. And it's a way to make a choice and to be aware of your choice. And so we can do that with like, what's most present for you right now? Are you feeling depressed? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling like physically ill or other? And then they go stand, whether it's in a group or an individual. Like a lot of times people will come into therapy and don't know what they want to work on. So you give them choice. And they walk around and they can feel in their body like, oh, this is it. We can do like school work, mom stuff.
You're giving their body a chance to keep the score and show it to you.
Yes.
Whoa.
And the body remembers the good stuff too.
Yeah.
So we can do it just purely with resourcing. We can spend 2 hours connecting with inner strengths and not go anywhere near trauma. Because really we need to, the resources or the strengths gathering is like what we put in our backpack before we go for a hike. So we have to have access to our inner resources and strengths before we do the trauma work so that we can do the trauma work safely.
I think just as I start to understand what you're talking about, you drop another knowledge nugget on my head, and it hurts a little
That's why this stuff takes 780 hours worth of training to get
this
certified
is
in.
Heavy
It's heavy. It's big. It's not like
and
it's
the
not
applications of it are diverse and profound.
And with social justice work, a lot of lawyers are certified in it because it helps role train people for trial and things like that. And so it's incredibly diverse.
Wow.
And we can use it for teaching. We can use it to introduce concepts like you were talking about, like the prefrontal cortex and stuff like that. Like imagine learning brain anatomy by being the prefrontal cortex and saying, this is what I do. And being all of the parts of the brain, right? And playing the parts. And then you won't forget.
Right.
Right.
Because you've acted it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you've embodied it.
And
lived it, and it's real.
Whoa.
So we use it for so many things.
I don't know that I was ready to have my mind blown so hard today. This is like, and then another. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Whoa. Can we roll it toward the addiction space? So, I also grew up in a family with some of this. My dad was an alcoholic, and my younger brother got really deeply into drugs and actually died when I was in med school. Is there an application for our brothers, you know, the folks out there that are struggling in these spaces, and how can we help them through this pathway?
It's actually where the most of the academic research is being done.
Oh.
Is in a residential treatment environment.
I feel like I should pause you because I get this sense that you're dropping another nugget on my head, another bomb of awesomeness.
Maybe.
Okay. I'll keep
no
going.
new terms. How about that? There's no new vocabulary here.
Keep going. But tons of research in this space.
Tons of research is happening. And in fact, just like this week, Dr. Scott Giacomucci posted that he and his team had an article accepted. And what the article leans toward is showing that psychodrama, and they did twice a week psychodrama groups in residential. And there was a previous study that looked at, I believe, anxiety and PTSD. And the new study also adds to those depression, traumatic grief, and prolonged grief disorder. And what the data shows is that the psychodrama groups decrease all of those things. And they are also measuring spontaneity, which increased. So what, in real life terms, what we can say is that it looks like as spontaneity increases, the mental health symptoms decrease. And that's magical because spontaneity is something that we can do easily in our everyday lives. It's play.
Yeah.
It's play, it's creativity, it's doing, something different. And people ask me a lot, what's the difference between spontaneity and impulsivity? And the answer is that spontaneity is the energy that puts creativity into action. That's how I kind of look at it.
Sure.
And impulsivity is not based in creativity. It's based in impulse.
So if we can just pull on that point just for a moment, there are forces at work in our society that create more impulsivity and less spontaneity. Yes. And that is the biggest pandemic we're currently facing, in my opinion. I see it all the time, and it is pulling all spontaneity, creativity, and those two things. It's pulling it and killing it and destroying it. And it's because we're becoming impulsive because we are having dopamine like hits all the time from our screens and phones and all these things. I am as guilty as the next person. I am an addict like everyone else. And we have to look at that and create spontaneity and creativity again. Like if you look back before we put smartphones in the hands of every teenager, et cetera, like the music was awesome. There was like great creativity going on in all these really cool spaces. And now, boy, is it tough. Like they're kind of just reworking the equation for music, and there's like less and less. And I have teenagers, and I'm like, oh man, I'm trying to give my kid some positive reinforcement for putting his phone down, which is rare. I often have to say, look, give it to me. I'm going to give you some time away from this phone so you can have some spontaneous whatever you decide to do. And I don't know if there's solutions in here, but I love anything that can create more creativity and spontaneity. It sounds like BDNF is what we're creating in the brain.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for.
Is change.
And it's also a different dopamine hit.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
Like, for me, it's, because I've been the protagonist in hundreds of dramas. And for me, it's always like that moment of like, because we're looking for that insight and the integration more than the big emotional catharsis. Mm-hmm. Because the integration and the insight is where like we'll change, right? So that moment of like, oh, like, of course, like I got this is like, that's a dopamine hit, right? And it's because it's like, oh, I found this thing in me that gave me this pleasure, that gave me this strength, right? Last June, I was the protagonist in a drama. And at some point in the drama, I looked behind me and I was like, oh, the finish line's behind me. And it was like, oh, and that moment was life-changing, right? Because that insight, but also like, that's a dopamine hit. Yeah. Like I got a reward. Like, oh, look, I already did the thing. It was really exciting to me to do that. And so these dramas they're often not trauma related. With trauma-informed psychodrama in particular, we're trying to focus on making sure that we're focusing on strengths-based roles and then future-based roles. And we do the trauma work. But what we find is that once we've addressed resources, often we don't have to go as deep.
Sure.
And so people don't have to.
So just so I can unpack that. Mm-hmm. So you first endorse strength-based roles. You might put them on this, what was the fancy word for it? The scale thing?
Like the spectrogram?
Yeah. So you might put them on a spectrogram and endorse some of their strengths and build them up and then go to the hard places with the spectrograms or whatever.
Yeah.
And then act those spaces and be the protagonist or agonist. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so what we actually do is like, so say someone wanted to work on holding boundaries with someone.
Sure.
And so what I might start that out with is who in your life is really good at boundaries? And we bring that person in.
That's my daughter, Arlie.
Well, there you go.
She's a gangster.
Yeah. So we would bring her in and then have you reverse roles with her and have her tell you how to do boundaries.
Basically F off all the time.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
But yeah. So she would tell you, or if you were afraid, then I would say, who's someone who really believes in you and sees you? And he would, and for me, it would be my husband. So we bring Jeff in, and I reverse roles with Jeff, and Jeff tells me how great I am, and then I can go do the hard thing. And it's
cool.
It's pretty great. And I've like brought in my favorite singer to like, because he's really cool and just does whatever he wants.
Yeah.
And so like had a conversation with him about how I'm also cool and can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And so it's like, right. But really the drama was about fear.
Yeah.
But once I had the conversation with him, I was like, oh, cool. Like,
I'm good.
Great. Give me your sunglasses. Like,
yeah, totally. That is super, super cool. So what is it for everyone is my question. And what about the naysayers that say, well, I'm introverted. I would do better with the one-on-one, talking to somebody, or I don't do well in groups. I'm uncomfortable acting. I don't like acting. It seems weird to me. What would you say to these people that maybe are like the naysayers, or maybe some of the people that say they're not a good fit for psychodrama?
Yeah, it's like anything else. Yeah. Like it may not be a good fit for everyone. But I do have a lot of people who say that, especially about group. Like I could never do group.
Yeah.
And then in residential, you don't really have a choice. You're doing group. And so I have people who have been through residential programs and done psychodrama in residential who will say that group is their favorite way to do therapy now. Because group, you have the support, you have the sharing, right? And what we know is that you're not just, it's not like group on TV where it's just like, okay, John, what's your trauma? And you just tell it. And we're like, oh, that sounds hard. And then everybody tells you how to fix your life. It's not like that. And so that's the thing, but it can absolutely be done in individual session. We do it with couples and families. And so, yeah, I do it in individual all the time.
That's rad. I love play. I'm like, I love to play. Whether it's a sport or music, my wife and I have a band. Like, I love to. One of my favorite things to do is get together with a group of people, whether it's on a soccer pitch or it's in my room in my house jamming. I might invite these musicians together, and we just play. And I'll tell them, here's the structure roughly, and then y'all just do what you feel right doing. So there's tons of spontaneity, and it doesn't always work out beautifully. But most of the time, if the person that shows up to play is a listener and a player, they will add and take away tastefully, beautifully, amazingly. And there's moments of pure magic that you're like, wow. Like I sang a verse of that song and I gave you like 24 measures of awesomeness and you went crazy. And then y'all started this like spontaneous, like dueling, like improvisation thing. Like that's magic. And I just think that spontaneous space of creativity I didn't realize how much it was helping me emotionally. I would get together with my bros and we, pass, dribble, pass, score. And it was like, whoa, we just created a symphony on the soccer field and it was magic, or on the basketball court or on the rugby pitch, or, wherever I'm at playing with my guys and my team and my people. I think there's strength in that play. And I could see how group psychodrama could be that environment where, hey, we're just riffing here and, we're helping each other and we're scoring goals. We're like winning here.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it's like. And the power of group is that sometimes, so a few months ago, I have I don't call them clients as much as I call them participants, but a client who has been kind of stuck for a little while. And I had a hypothesis that maybe they would benefit from a group. Because what I know about group is that group is like a microscopic sample of life.
Yeah, microcosm.
Yeah. Totally. And so I thought, well, I wonder if this thing that they can't quite get to in therapy, if they could get to it in group.
Yeah.
And that it happened. So we just kind of have kept doing group.
Oh.
And because that's what it is a lot of times if someone is stuck, someone else in the group is stuck in the same way. And their energy kind of
unsticks it.
Yeah, well, because now there's two people with that energy in the room, because we really do, like, it really is energetic and pretty mystical. And that's why it looks like magic, because it sort of is.
It's BDNF. I'm telling you, there is science here in this space. And when you create that spontaneity, and then there's also norepinephrine, and then there's dopamine. Yep. I could see it. I could see it as this unravels and someone is doing this, a session with you. I could see the dopamine, the norepinephrine, and even the serotonin release. Like, I see all the neurotransmitters and what they're doing, and the BDNF spike that occurs that creates a lasting change. Like, this is rad work.
Yeah.
I mean, super rad.
And you had asked earlier about introversion. And so I think a lot of people really identify with that,
totally.
Right? But a lot of what we're doing is going back to the creativity and spontaneity and the genius that's really in all of us when we're little.
Yeah.
So we're not like going back and reverting to inner child, right? But like, think about a 4-year-old. They worry a whole lot less about what people think.
And they're so spontaneous. They can go and just be like totally spontaneous.
Yeah. And so that's as we're looking to increase spontaneity, that's what we're looking for. And I was at the National Conference for Psychodrama last week, and a few people were talking about how they are surprised at the number of introverts at the conference, because they wouldn't have thought that introverts would be psychodramatists. But I have a curiosity about if it accesses a part of us that is okay to be seen.
Yeah.
And for me, that's been a huge thing. Like, my first trainer tells people, Man, when I first met her, you couldn't hear a word she said about me. And like, I don't be quiet much anymore, but she would holler at me, use your outside voice. And that became like my therapeutic goal for like 2 years was to learn how to use my voice. And as I did that, everything else in my life changed.
Wow.
And so that was the piece of it, right? My Enneagram changed. Everything about me changed as I learned to express in a different way rather than hiding and holding and being pulled in.
Yeah. Super neat. This is super neat. The thought I have is about the use of psychodrama around maybe rescripting some of those. We often like believe these things about ourselves, and whether it's I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert or I only can do this, I don't read well, or like psychodrama could be such a strong tool in like helping people rescript some of these dialogues that they've been telling themselves for so long that create like emotional roadblocks to progression.
Imagine having a talk with math. If you don't think it's just like I'm bad at math, right? Like the joke for a long time for me was I'm a social worker. We don't do math because math was really hard for me in school. And so, and I know a lot of social workers who are very good at math, and I don't say that anymore. But that's the thing, right? Like my messaging was I'm not good at math. My messaging as a child was I'm not good at art. I'm not creative. I actually did not think that I had a talent. Like I would joke, like even when I was 40, I would say I'm still waiting to discover my secret hidden talent because everybody had a talent but me. And so that was another thing that like shifted. Like I'm pretty good at expressing myself and, and I tell stories and things like that. But I wouldn't have even 7-8 years ago.
Wow.
I would have never come here and done this.
Yeah.
Ever.
That is super cool that you can move those types of tectonic, because those are massive plates that people sometimes never move their whole life.
Core beliefs.
Yes.
Absolutely core beliefs.
Yes.
Like getting attached to like, well, this is just my personality.
Yeah.
Well, like caretaker was my personality because it was the role I got put in when I was a little kid.
Yeah, totally.
Right? So I believed truly that it was my job to keep everybody safe and alive.
Yeah. So there it is.
So I'm not a caretaker by nature. I'm a caretaker by somebody had to do it. And so that's the difference, right? And then and I did that piece of psychodrama, right? Like where I really had an interaction with like this idea of like, oh, it was never my job. And so I was able to let go a lot of the codependency and people pleasing and saviorism and all of that I'd just done my whole life naturally, right? Totally. Thinking it was natural when really it was based in a role that I'd been placed in and figured out how to play.
Whoa. This is beautiful. It's like right brain, left brain healing. I'm a big fan of a balance of both right brain and left brain in all of our labs, but also in medicine and healthcare, in mental wellness as well. I think that the CBT is a little bit, it's pretty heavy left brain, right? It's very logic, reason, and frontal cortex-y stuff. Whereas psychodrama maybe can implement some of that, but also pull it into the right brain, the art space and the performance space, but also there's just, again, a spontaneous, like, the answer is there. Let's find it together in this personal or group setting. It makes me very uncomfortable, the science side of me, but it makes my musician side tingle. Like I've had goosebumps like 4 times during our discussion because it's exciting and it's neat. And I think there's a wide girth of people that you can help with this in such a diverse ways. Now that I've said that, because I wanted to say that, I want to talk about how do we stop or avoid or be careful with those internal beliefs, and how do we I learned this as a young kid. I don't know how or why or whatever, but I got really mad when people told me, hey, you're this, you're that. And I was like, man, I get so offended. I'm like, you don't get to tell me what I am or who I am. You don't get that. Yeah. And I'm discovering that. Thank you very much. And it's my journey. And I would like give people a pretty hard stiff arm at a young age. And what it created for me is a balance in right brain, left brain. I never told I did tell myself I was a bad reader because I was put in the B group when I was a little kid, and because I was like really nervous about reading out loud. And anyway, that was one thing that I had to re-script. I can read well, actually. I can do fine.
Well, you must be able to read because the whole doctor thing.
I told myself for years I was a bad test taker. I had to re-script that. Yeah. But I used to get so mad when the personality tests. I get so mad at those. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're trying to tell me I'm a this and this and that? I can be those things, but I can be other things too. And I can be introverted. I could be extroverted. I could be super good at math. I could be super good at music and song and dance. And I love all those spaces. And so you don't get to tell me whatever boxes you think I should be in. Like even in med school, they had us do these things and I was mad at it the whole time. And I didn't deliberately sabotage. I just answered truthfully, but I scored right in the middle of the pack. Like, you're neither this nor that, nor this nor that. I'm like, well, because I can flex to all those spaces. And psychodrama creates a space where we can do that.
Yeah, you can. What you're describing, here's vocabulary time, but we would call that a role repertoire. Like you can play all those different roles, and you have an idea of how to play them, right? If I am over-identified with a role, right, say introvert or extrovert, then I may need to try on other roles to see how they fit or how I might develop them.
Yeah.
And so that's, and I think that's basically like, that would be like psychodrama for words for what you're talking about, is that you had a wide role repertoire and you were unwilling to just be like locked in to one. And I think that how we explore that is just by getting curious, right? So if I may be locked in the role, for me, back to the saving, right? Yep. I was very locked in that. And I remember, so my brother died a few months before my child turned 18 and went and moved to Yellowstone National Park. And I remember crying on the way home. And, my husband is so sweet and said something like, what's wrong? It'll be okay. And I was like, nobody needs me. And he said, well, I need you. And I was like, yeah, but not like that, right? Because what my system was, true or not, my system was telling me.
I'm valuable if people need me.
Yeah. And in that moment, nobody needed me. And that hit me really hard because I was so identified with the role of being needed. Or of that, my worth coming from helping people or caretaking and all of that. And so it was really hard. And we see that, right? I'm sure you see it as we approach empty nest. And parents are like, well, what do I do now? Or retirement or any life stage change that things get shaken up. And it's like, oh, this is this whole new role, right? Like now all of our kids are out of the house. So it's like, oh, now we're just like, we're in the role of empty nesters, which is fine. But I know that a lot of people really struggle with it. Totally. Because they're very like the parent role or the work role or whatever. And there's a lot of grief with changing roles. And so we look at a lot of that in psychodrama, is a lot of it is based on like, how do you play that role? And I do it when I'm training new therapists. I have them I put 3 chairs on the floor and have them sit in the chair. Like, okay, this is today. How does it feel? This is further along. And then like, that's licensure. Like, that's like, you've finished school, you've done all the hours and you're getting your license, right? And so they go sit in it. And then they have a conversation with themselves 10 years from that. So now they're in their first year of internship, but they've already stood in the place where they've accomplished the things. And they know what it feels like to make the journey. And so I would say the same thing with any of these beliefs about ourselves is get curious. And what would the opposite role be? Right? For me, the opposite role was person with boundaries. Not an easy role to take.
And is there magic in acting that role, like sitting in it and performing it for an onlooker or a group of onlookers?
Yeah, but it's not performative. It's so real. But like being in the role of person with boundaries and like pushing up against a physical block, like we build things. We set stages. We build a doorway to walk through, and all these things. So it's but yeah, there's so much value in it because it's practicing, right? And we can talk about like the felt sense, right? Or even like deliberate practice with music. We're practicing the behavior we want, but we're doing it in real time and we're having the experience. And part of the warm up is it creates like a trance where we call it a surplus reality. And I'm not going into that today, but your body doesn't know whether you had the conversation in real life or in surplus reality, right? Like in my relationship with my mom, I've had so many conversations with my mother that she was not there for. But my system
Recognize that.
just believes that we had it. And so then when I did tell her the things in real life, I actually told her, I was like, well, I already told you all of this, so I have no problem saying it again. like I've already done this, right? But it was so much easier
Totally.
to tell the truth of my experience.
My wife would call this, so she has a master's in English and she's a right brain, left brain balanced person as well. She's amazing. She would call this story truth versus like truth, And she jokes in humanities, like she's like, well, I'm an English professor. I make up truth all the time. And it's true. And that's what's neat is the visceral response to that story truth is that it's truth. And that creates that reframing of the I am.
Yeah.
I am a mother who needs a child to take care of. And now I am an empty nester. And I'm moving toward that, by the way. My 2 last kids are at home and my one is graduating high school this year. And so I've got 3 out and about, 2.5 out and about, and 1 left at the house. And so yes, I think taking on those roles and creating a space where you can assume those roles before they happen or even after they happen so that you can better process them and recalibrate emotionally. Wow.
Yeah. And so you can take on the role of anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I'm bad at reading, right? I can have a conversation with a book, or I can have a conversation with my kindergarten teacher who shamed me, or I can have a conversation with, whatever, right? Like, or a part of myself, or imagine I am a good reader. I have a conversation with the good reader part of me. And so like the possibilities are endless. And it's just so cool because it allows us to get curious about the beliefs. So, right. So you had asked about like handling them with care. And I think that's what it is literally like, I can hold it in my hand and look at it. Right. And get curious about it. Right. How long has it been here? Are there moments where I've felt differently about it? Right. Moments where maybe I was a good reader or, whatever it is, and really handle it with curiosity because it's a thing. Right. And we use a lot, like kind of the thing that I'm known for is stuffed animals, but like pick a stuffed animal that can represent that. Right. And what's about it? And like, oh, it's kind of heavy, but it's really soft and it's steady or whatever. Right. Like, and interacting with it that way. There's so much that we do.
It's spontaneous.
Yeah. and like people just know. And even standing up. I had a grad student tell me at a presentation a few weeks ago, she was like, it's wild because when people are stuck in therapy, I just tell them to stand up and then the therapy does itself, which is pretty true because the body standing knows more. If you think about, it's a polyvagal system and all of that, like when we're not scrunched up, we're not kinked like a hose, we may know more. So like my people just know even in staff meetings. If somebody like can't think of what they're trying to say, I'll just be like, stand up. And then they're like, ugh, and then they do. and then they know.
I have a spontaneous thought.
Okay.
So I was thinking these group sessions are super cool. And I was thinking, how rad would it be to do a group session on a stage where people could watch? And then I was thinking Shakespeare, because that's exactly what Shakespeare did. I forget which one we watched. It's a comedy. My wife would be totally sad that I forgot the name of it. But we go to the Shakespeare Festival. My wife's a big literature nerd, and so we do this every year. And we went to this one, and this guy is like the guy of the protagonist is like very staunchly this way, like I'm never going to get married, blah, 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 right? And then over a series of events on the stage, he totally does a 100% change in a total different direction and says, no, I'm absolutely madly in love with this person. I'm definitely going to marry them. And that is psychodrama. It is changing your brain from thinking I am this way to thinking now I am totally this way.
Yeah.
Totally different. And I think Shakespeare was doing this a long time ago.
Yeah.
He was showing people psychodrama.
Yeah, that you can change. And psychodrama is based in the theater.
Mm.
It was there was the theater of like the Church of Spontaneity, and then the Theater of Spontaneity in Vienna in the 1920s. And it's absolutely based in theater.
Would you consider doing like you have to get into consent from it in a lot of ways, but like, I think this would be so neat for those people considering psychodrama to just see a psychodrama session.
Yeah, they call it an open
stage.
session.
Oh, okay. So it does exist.
Yeah.
Okay,
so we can, it's a whole real thing.
Oh.
And so, you can do it as a community, right? And some of the early psychodramas were enacting the news of the day, like get a newspaper and act out the news story. And so those kind of things, it doesn't even have to be someone's personal story. There's another model called sociodrama, which is basically society as the patient, as the protagonist. So it's rather than being one person's piece of work, it's the whole group's piece of work. So there are tons of ways to do it.
Wow.
And we should just have like a psychodrama party.
Totally. No, I think this would be fantastic. Aimee, I want you to tell our listeners on how to get a hold of you. What is the best way to maybe schedule a psychodrama appointment? I will obviously send people to you from my clinic because I think this is a wonderful mental wellness tool. Are there maybe first tell us, you mentioned the research in the anxiety, PTSD, depression. I would consider, learning deficits, IM stories, rescripting dialogues, like recalibrating brain cells. Like, is there anything that psychodrama is limited to? I don't see any limits with this.
There, because if we're going slow and doing it carefully, then there really aren't.
It sounds like maybe be careful in some spaces though.
Yeah, and that's why it requires so much training. And so things like dissociative behaviors need a care, right? A different, more kind of nuanced approach, because we're dealing with parts of selves, but there are multiple selves.
Oh yeah.
And so things like that, And so I think it's also important that there are people that are doing like groups that they'll use the term like psychodrama informed or things like that. And I think with any therapy that it's important to ask the person you're getting therapy from what their level of training is, right? So as therapists, it's unethical for us to practice outside of our scope of training and competence. And so I think for the public, right? Like I want people to ask how I learned what I learned and all of that. So, and that's not just with psychodrama, it's with anything. People will say they specialize in something they had a weekend of training in or things like that. And so I think it's important, especially for your listeners, to just ask any practitioner of any therapy method what
level of comfort they have.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And their experience and their training. because psychodrama particularly is so involved. There are 3 people in the state of Utah that are certified in it, myself and 2 others. And so it's that rare here to be certified in. And it does have the potential to do harm like anything.
Sure.
And so that's why the trauma-informed aspects of it are so important.
Sure. Tell us about how do we find you?
Okay, so Hearten House is HEARTEN house.com. So Hearten means like to lift up or to encourage.
To enhearten, yeah.
But it gets all sorts of new ways of spelling. But that's how it is. But also I am just Aimee Hadfield. And I am Aimee.Hadfield on Instagram. Hearten House is on Instagram, Facebook, all the things. But yeah, heartenhouse.com. And we have a clinical team of 10. And we do not just psychodrama, but we've got wilderness and adventure therapists. We've got dance and movement. We've got art-based things, anything experiential, anything embodied. We are very excited to help people who talk therapy hasn't been the whole answer for.
Yeah. That is so cool. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom in this space. And,
You're welcome.
Or at least some of it.
You got some vocabulary lessons.
I did. And I learned so much. And I'm excited for it. I kind of want to come up there with my family and just do like cool psychodrama as a family. Do people do that?
Yeah, we do. We actually do. I do intensives where I'll spend a day to multiple days with an individual couple or family and just like work out a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, psychodrama with families is actually something I'm very interested in because the family stuff was what got me into this work. And so it's now become like full circle. And psychodrama with families is like an area I'd like to research.
Awesome. Okay, well, I could be your research subject.
See, there you
got
go.
teenagers. It's the perfect situation.
Just sign the forms.
Thank you, Aimee. Thank you for coming on and being such an awesome guest. And
Thanks for having
educating
me.
us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hope you guys learned some cool stuff today. It was fantastic. Psychodrama, super cool. And like and subscribe. Thanks.